Thank you for staying tuned. Well, the spate of regulatory sanctions on companies is no doubt a source of concern to foreign and domestic investors in the local Nigerian market. Beside the political and insecurity risks to business in the terrain, experts have also deduced that perhaps a change in regulatory approach to compliance can change the attitude of boards and management team to business. At a meeting of some enterprise risk managers in Lagos, some thought leaders shared their viewpoints during a panel discussion. Let's take a listen.
Regulatory environment is a major business environment variable these days. And just as the speaker said, the regulators need to connect a lot more with the operators in the economy. This is not just about the financial sector. It's something that we experience across all sectors of the economy. The regulators sometimes come with a mindset that they know everything. And they come up with regulations sometimes that creates more problems for the system than what it solves. Then sometimes there are also issues of clarity of policy, which also increases the risk of regulation. The speaker, highlighted how high the regulatory risk is. It is not a good thing to have a risk profile that is high, because if you are talking about attracting investment, the lower the risk, the better for investment. I'll give you a few examples. Sometimes, because of the overbearing nature of regulators, sometimes even very intimidating nature of regulators, the operators sometimes become, there's a lot of fear in the environment. There was a time we invited a banker, an MD of a bank, to make a presentation. He sent one of his very top managers to make the presentation. We also invited the CBN to make a presentation. So the moment he saw that a CBN deputy governor was on seat, he said he was not going to make his presentation. That's the man from the bank. I said, why? He said he has been given instructions that if the CBN is there, he should not make any statement. That shows you the extent of the kind of relationship that exists, which is not good for the system. Because the quality of policy, the quality of regulatory environment depends on the exchange of ideas between the operators and the regulators.
That example is the typical example of everything else, not just only in banking. And it shows that there's a fundamental disconnect between leadership and followership and the culture. Earlier on, I talked about Shine mentioned about the fact that burden of knowledge is moving on. A lot of people in those spaces, they're sort of trapped in their old way of thinking. And so as the business leaders are eager to do something more creative, sometimes because they don't understand it, and the admittance of, I am not sure, can I learn from you, is something we don't do in Africa very well. The leader is always right. And the leader will hardly admit that, can I work with you to learn this thing you're doing so that it will benefit us all? So that fear of, if I say something, they will penalize me or they might come and investigate me, it's everywhere. And at the risk of saying, probably get rid of them, but it's about, it's about beginning to help the market say, guys, we are not competing. We are not here to take your job. We are here to work together. There are things that, from the market point of view, happening, and we want to change. You mentioned about risk being the lower risk for the reward. What you're trying to say is that the market is sensing opportunities, but the regulator is afraid that can we let them go. But also, you won't blame them. You won't blame them because the market itself, historically, they have abused the freedom and the responsibility given. In our environment where the moment you say, can I trust you? Can I leave you? Would you continue to do that thing if I'm no longer there? It's a difficult thing in this society.
How did Nigeria start regulation? One single body, central bank. Every other person were departments out of that central bank. So if you look at the nature of the laws of the central bank, you find out that in any of these regulators, most cases you either find one central bank representative, one somebody in there, because they were like departments in there. And so this culture of every one of them, SECO, NSU, NICOMO, they were just created out of that process. And as such, we tend to use the wrong notion. We call it the apex regulator. That is it's an improper English in the first place, and it is not correct. The apex regulator is the Securities and Exchange Commission. You have a central bank. There's nothing apex about it. A central bank, pure and simple. And it is at that level of understanding that you begin to understand risk management. You see that table you showed, that thing you showed, you wrote strategy and you wrote risk. No, there's something missing in between. There's strategy and there's performance. In between is actually risk management. The totality of that triangle forms what you call the corporate governance matrix. That is the job of an organization, because within your strategy, there are inherent risk, which is in the middle. Within your execution, before you even execute and after execution, when you do post-mortem, there's inherent risk. So what we face in Nigeria, really, and especially for an institute like this, is that, you know, you like to attend conferences a lot in this country. You talk a lot, but you do less execution. Maybe when we start doing more of that, we can begin to approximate, really, how this thing works. For example, and I will lean on that one to piggyback. Do you know that at Prussia, we set up a section called Prussia Regulators for one single reason? We wanted to develop a checklist of what kind of regulations would any single sector require to deal with. We got stuck 4 years after. Why? For some companies, the number of regulations that you have to deal with makes you an unprofitable venture straight away. You know why? Because every time there's a problem, rather than adjust the architecture of the regulatory framework, you know what we do? We just add another layer.
The question is, how do we start navigating the regulatory environment? The first thing we have to look at is that the regulators must recognize that they have their job is to ensure that the operator exists and the operator succeeds, and not necessarily to kill the operator. I sit on the board of a company that is having issues with their industry regulator, and they had meetings with the apex, the leaders of that regulatory organization. And I said to them, your primary objective is to ensure the survival of operators in your industry, and not necessarily to be the, to kind of witness their burial, or to be the one that would lead to their going extinct. So that's the first thing. The mindset of our regulators must be that, look, my job is to ensure that the operators within my industry survive and prosper. So once we come from that mindset, then it becomes easier for them to see the activities of the operators as necessary for the survival of their operations. And another thing we must realize that practice is always ahead of regulation, because you don't regulate what does not exist. It's only when practice has started in a particular direction that regulators be conscious of it and take measures to look at that practice and build structures to make sure the practice does not infringe on the system. So that's also very critical, because there is nothing you can't regulate in the air.
See, you cannot regulate innovation. You can provide guidelines. That is why you find that the regulatory approach within technology is about regulatory sandboxes, whereby they allow them to work and you see how it is. For example, XM board, it's not efficient, it's not working. We'll close it down sometime by next year, by God's grace. But for you to have the growth bond in there, the laws in CAMA, not ISA, does not allow you to bring a tech company into your Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, you cannot even do crowdfunding in Nigeria, for example, not because ISA is stopping it, but CAMA does not allow it. Yet, when we are reviewing